Hello, everyone. I am Margaret Lowe. I am the CEO of WBUR. Welcome to CitySpace. I love being able to say that again. It is wonderful to see so many of you in real life, or IRL as we now are so accustomed to saying. We have hundreds of you in the room with us. I can feel the energy, and we have hundreds more with us virtually. We feel your presence too, including our friends watching on PBS Rhode Island. It turns out nearly half of that station's audience lives in Massachusetts, so they're excited to be here too. You are all with us tonight because you care about the future of this region and about our shared planet, and because you'll have a chance to meet two candidates seeking to lead the great state of Massachusetts at a time when the stakes are high, very high, especially when it comes to the environment. The scientific forecast paints a stark picture. More frequent heat waves are hitting cities like Boston the hardest. Sea level rise is increasing faster off our shores than most places in the world. And if you thought our New England weather was unpredictable now, you better buckle up. Perhaps we can stem the tide. According to the world's scientists, the future is still in our hands. So tonight we will hear directly from Attorney General Maura Healey and State Senator Sonia Chang Diaz about the course they envision for Massachusetts when it comes to climate and the environment. Our aim for tonight is really simple. We want to have a rich and respectful conversation about one of the most consequential issues of our time. This is actually the reason that CitySpace exists, because we know that there is something very powerful about bringing people into one room to grapple with some of the most pressing issues of our times, big issues and ideas, to listen, to really listen to one another, and to learn from one another, whether it's a world-class expert, a journalist, an artist, a writer, or just maybe your next governor. Speaking of bringing people together, I want to thank our collaborators who are helping us make tonight possible, the Environmental League of Massachusetts. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce ELM's board chair, Gordon Burns, who would love to say hello and to share a few thoughts. Gordon.
Great. Thank you so much, Margaret, and the entire WBUR team. Good evening to everyone. As Margaret said, it's great to be here IRL. So welcome to the Candidate Forum on Energy and the Environment. As Margaret mentioned, I am Gordon Burns, and I'm the chair of ELM. ELM is a nonpartisan policy advocacy organization, and we have been advocating for responsible environmental policy since 1898. We have a history of convening forums of candidates running for public office, and we're delighted to partner with WBUR tonight. I also want to thank our supporting partners, the Massachusetts Environmental Justice Table, the Alliance for Clean Energy Solutions, the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance, the Massachusetts Land Trust Alliance, and Transportation for Massachusetts. Thank you all. So Massachusetts has long been an incubator of bright ideas, and we have the opportunity now to light a path to lead the nation in developing and implementing policies to create a more sustainable and healthy future for us all. The Commonwealth's ability to move down this path depends on the next governor being able to protect our critical infrastructure, improve air quality and human health, electrify transportation and building sectors and power them with renewable energy, invest in innovative climate solutions, and reckon with centuries of environmental injustice. These last 2 years have brought into sharp focus the important relationship between climate action and economic, public health, and environmental justice issues. We're excited about tonight because it's important that Massachusetts voters understand the candidates' positions on these key environmental issues, and so that we can be confident in voting for a greener state and hitting our future decarbonization goals. We look forward to a thoughtful discussion this evening as we walk down this path together to a more sustainable future. Thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Gordon, so much. It's really wonderful to collaborate with you. So before we roll, I want to note that we did invite the major Republican candidates to be here tonight, Jeff Deal and Chris Doty. They declined, but they know that they have a standing invitation to come to a forum like this at CitySpace, and we do hope they do. With that, it is time to meet the candidates who are here, 2 women, both Democrats, both vying to be the next governor of Massachusetts. Please welcome Attorney General Maura Healey. Welcome. And State Senator Sonia Diaz. And last but not least, here to lead the conversation is my colleague and host of Radio Boston, Tiziana Dearing. As we say, take it away, TD.
Thanks, Margaret. Happy to have everybody here. Our goal tonight is really to have a conversation about energy and environment, about the policies that are important for the Commonwealth, and the positions that the 2 of you have. I don't want to treat it like a debate. I'm not going to try to make it a debate. We'll have a conversation back and forth. I'm going to ask you both some questions, sometimes the same ones, sometimes different. I may jump in to follow. If you want to jump in, let me know. We can do that too. And we have some questions from the audience that they submitted in advance. We'll pepper a few of those in throughout to get some other voices in the mix as well. I think for this first question, I will ask you both the same thing. It's kind of a nice way to start. And since you are immediately to my right, AG Healey, we'll start with you. This one's on climate. We have 8 years until 2030 to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% below 1990 levels. So I'm looking for the 3 most important actions that the next governor can take to get us there.
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you tonight. Many thanks to the Environmental League of Massachusetts and to WBUR for hosting this conversation tonight. You know, from my perspective, it is about big time revving up renewables. I mean, we in the legislature and we've got a plan, but we got to be a lot more aggressive about it. We have got to really rev up renewables as we move away from fossil fuels. What am I talking about? My plan is about doubling our wind targets, quadrupling our storage targets, something that doesn't get talked about but is increasingly important, and then doing all that we can with solar. So revving up renewables is really important. I also think it's really important that there be more intentionality across state government, and that's why I called for a climate chief to actually sit and advise the next governor, me directly, and my plan would be so that the climate agenda is driven not just through the Energy and Environmental Affairs Office, but that every agency is owning it. Economic development, housing, transportation. So I think that kind of intentionality that has to bleed through every agency and have the capacity to work with state, others at the federal level and the local level is really important. And then I think it's got to be centered on equity and environmental justice. And what I'm talking about there ranges from creating for the first time an Office of Public Participation at the Department of Public Utilities, creating and ensuring that our Energy Siting Facilities Board actually includes a person representative of the environmental justice community, and making sure that as we build forward, and climate is a crisis, it's an existential crisis, but in Massachusetts it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity for jobs, it is an opportunity to make us the climate capital of the United States and really the world when you think about the innovation. And also, it is a chance to address long-standing inequities, disparities that have persisted far too long in this space.
Senator Chang Diaz, same question for you to start. So by 2030, the 3 most important things the next governor can do to get us there.
Sure. Okay, so first off, I want to thank ELM and WBUR for hosting us. And before we went on the air, someone mentioned to me about your shoes, Tiziana, and I just got to say, they're fabulous. The folks listening at home can't see them, but they're fabulous. So a little distraction from climate there.
I'm all for it.
But listen, 3 most important things for the next governor to do. I'm going to approach this a little bit differently. Look, I think we can all agree that climate change is an existential crisis, right? As scientists have told us again and again, it is a crisis for our world, our country, and our state. And so the first most important thing that our next governor can do is bring a enduring and unflinching sense of urgency to this work, right? And it's going to cut across a lot of different tactics. But if the things that we need to accomplish in terms of changing our transportation sector, our built environment in our buildings, building up the green tech sector. Those are 3 different buckets that I could name here, but across all of those, if those were easy to do, they would have been done by now, right? When you think about tackling our transportation sector, which is the single biggest emitter of greenhouse gases in our state, we need to make massive changes to the way that people move around in this state. And that's not necessarily going to be easy to do, and we're going to need that sense of urgency and that political conviction and courage to follow through on the nice words that you're going to hear from all of us at election time. So urgency is the first thing that I would put. But then I'll break it down into those other buckets. First thing, when you are in a hole, everyone knows this, right? What's the first thing that you got to do when you're in a hole? Stop digging, you got it, right? Ding, 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 ding. That means we need to stop building new fossil fuel infrastructure in our state. And I've made a clear pledge, thank you. I've made a clear pledge in my Green New Deal plan to use the full powers of the executive branch to block the construction of new fossil fuel infrastructure in our state. So stopping digging is first thing. We need to tackle our transportation sector, like I said, because it is where most of our emissions are coming from. Under my plan, we are going to make big investments in electric vehicles, in EV infrastructure, yes, but we are also going to make big investments in growing and expanding and making more accessible mass transit in this state. That includes east-west rail. It includes going fare-free on our MBTA and our regional transit authorities so that we are getting more people out of their cars and into mass transit, and recognizing that every person who is riding a train or a bus in our state is contributing to our success at meeting our emissions reduction targets. And then in our built environment, we make a clear pledge in my Green New Deal plan that we are going to set clear targets to which we will hold ourselves accountable in a Chang Diaz administration, and to which you can hold me accountable. That means we are going to make all of our new construction, our new buildings, carbon zero by 2030, to get to your original benchmark that you were talking about. Our existing buildings, that's a tougher nut to crack, but we still set a benchmark and say we're going to get all of our existing buildings to be carbon zero by 2045. And it's by setting those clear benchmarks that we are going to retain that sense of urgency and accountability, which again is that first most important thing.
So I think what I'd like to do here is kind of try to peel the curtain back a little bit on how the two of you think about this. So I almost want to, what's the running narrative in your head when you're thinking about this? And so I'll stay with you for a second, Senator Chang Diaz. Take one of the 3 buckets that you just talked about, and let's talk about that place unique to the Commonwealth where crisis meets opportunity. And when you think about that space in one of your 3 buckets, talk about something that's unique to the Commonwealth and the place where crisis and opportunity meet, and that you think we can do something really particular about.
So I want to say, actually, I think, Tiziana, that Massachusetts is not unique in that there's an intersection of crisis and opportunity in meeting the climate crisis. We do have huge risks that we need to avert here. And this isn't something that's like around the corner and only my kids and my grandkids are going to experience it. It's here, it's now, right? We're already seeing record rainfall, record heat, more damaging storms than ever before. But that's true across the country. And we also have huge economic opportunities that we can just, that are just waiting for us to grab them. That is also true across the country. But it is more true here in Massachusetts for a couple reasons. One, I think we take a special pride in Massachusetts in being a beacon, right? And being that city on a hill. We can drive change nationally and globally by being a global capital of the green energy sector and the industry here. It is something that we can nurture and export from Massachusetts. We are also unique in Massachusetts in the incredible natural resources that we have access to in this state, right off of our coastlines. We have, by many estimates, enough potential in wind energy alone, in offshore wind energy alone, to meet our electricity needs in Massachusetts 19 times over. Think about what we can do with that here. So I think that what is unique about Massachusetts is the fact that we can be an exporter, both of, literally, of energy, but also, more importantly, that we can be an exporter of the political models and the successes of transitioning, and again, doing it with urgency. Because in truth, we're not limited by natural resources. We're not limited by technology and know-how here in Massachusetts. Our only limiting factor is political will and political courage to go fast and to go more urgent and to go bigger on climate change in Massachusetts. And we can be a leader of a race to the top nationally in passing Green New Deals all across this country.
So Attorney General Healey, sort of adjacent to that, I too do think of Massachusetts as sort of America's civic incubator, that we have a long history of incubating the new ideas, the changes, the innovations that change everyday life. In that space, looking at that long tradition of sort of civic incubation, what comes next? Where is that investment next? So that 10, 15, 20 years from now, the U.S. looks at Massachusetts again and says, yep, they took us there next.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is so much to say on this. And, I come to this informed by my experience as Attorney General. There was a reason that I was there to sue ExxonMobil. We have had the most successful litigation to date against ExxonMobil. It was to expose the lies and to tell the story about how Exxon has set us back decades because of their deception to consumers and investors. It was my office that went after Volkswagen, remember, for those dirty diesel cars. And way back, this is several years ago, we took a huge chunk of that money that we recovered, $100 million for the state, and my office decided that then we were going to put it towards electric charging stations and infrastructure. And so I come informed by that. I come informed by our efforts to just try to force the Department of Public Utilities to do things like open up a docket on the future of gas, to really look at where we need to go in this state. And I come to this having spent a little bit of time playing defense, bringing more than 200 actions against the Trump administration just in the environmental space alone to hold the line. I am thrilled at the prospect, the opportunity to look forward and to seize what is here in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is unique. There is no state in the country that has the opportunity that we have right now with respect to climate and our clean energy economy. And here's why. Sitting around us right now are the companies that are developing the technologies in this space that will power the transition. We have the opportunity to seize that, to take advantage of that. We have an opportunity, as Senator Shane Diaz mentioned, to make Massachusetts the offshore capital of the United States. And that's incredibly exciting. Think about the great paying jobs that come with that. And truly, we have an opportunity through that to reduce our emissions. Obviously, we've got to talk a lot about transportation. I talk about it in my plan, that's key. But just to focus on wind, for example, I mean, there is no place right now in the United States that has the capacity that we have off of our shores. There is no state right now that is poised to grow the technology and to work in concert with, I think about this climate corridor in Massachusetts. We are so lucky. Look at UMass Lowell, out to WPI, down to Woods Hole, MIT, Greentown Labs. I mean, and I'm probably offending some. I don't mean to leave anyone out. Wonderful, right? But we've got this opportunity to really work together to harness that. And I think about, wind, which today as we speak, I think of Somerset. Back when I got elected, Somerset was a dirty coal plant down in the South Coast. It is now going to be an offshore wind manufacturing facility that's going to sit alongside New Bedford. And you think about what's happened and what is possible. And again, with jobs, I'll say the other thing with wind, it's great you get the wind, but you got to deal with the transmission and you got to deal with modernizing the grid. And those are also opportunities for investment, jobs, and application of a clean energy know-how and technology and innovation that is happening right here in the Commonwealth, that is ours, that we should cherish and do everything we can to celebrate and support.
So where have we dropped the ball?
How long we got on this question?
Not that much time.
So look, it's important to celebrate our victories because I think they keep us motivated and knowing that the success is within our reach. So we have done some things right as a state. I do really want to call that out. In particular, in the climate roadmap bill that we passed last year in the legislature, one of the things that we did, it was by an amendment that I filed, I'm very proud of, we changed the mission of the Department of Public Utilities, of the DPU, to make sure that in addition to caring about cost that ratepayers are paying for their energy, that they also have to factor in the impacts of climate change and equity, right, into all of their policy decisions at the DPU. So we are getting some things right. But I ask, half in jest, but half in serious about how long we got, because there's a whole lot of stuff we're not getting right. One, we are just not going fast enough. We are woefully behind target already in this decade when it comes to transitioning our built environment to zero carbon. We are just making tiny little nibbles around the edges on the numbers that we need to hit by the end of this decade. And that, in large part, I would chalk that up to the fact that there are some very powerful interests in this state, as well as other states, fossil fuel industries, utilities, their executives, who are slow walking the change in our state. And we have allowed that to penetrate into our decision making as a state too much, Tiziana. It's why we see that we are still doing things like allowing your dollars and mine, right, all of our ratepayer dollars, to go to subsidize new fossil fuel equipment and infrastructure going into people's homes in Massachusetts. We gotta, again, like I said, when you're in a hole, you gotta stop digging. We gotta stop putting in new fossil fuel infrastructure. And because I know that that is going to continue to be a challenge for the next governor, as we are seeking to go with urgency and with speed and with vigor in the direction that we need to go, I'm making a pledge here tonight that I will reject all campaign donations from oil, gas, coal executives, their lobbyists, their PACs. And I want to invite you as well, Attorney General, to join me in that pledge and return the $50,000 of fossil fuel donations that you have received since your last election, so that the voters in Massachusetts can know, where our North Star is and where our loyalties lie and where our focus is going to be as we tackle these immense challenges.
Okay, so you got to react.
Well, I'll respond to your question by saying that it's true. The state has done many good things directionally. I agree with Senator Chang Diaz. It is about urgency, it is about aggressiveness, it is about action now. And that's, in my plan, what I tried to put forward are actually implementable things that we can do. I think about the offshore wind. I mean, where we failed as a state, I think, is not forcing the utilities to do more. Right now, part of the problem with this space is that it's too hard, for those in the industry to get the interconnection, right, for the transmission. Because again, you can have the wind, but if you can't transmit it, and if the utilities and others are delaying the time and adding to the costs of that, that is a problem. We've got to do better. We're also a state, get this, we're also a state that allows kickbacks to the utilities if they agree to sign contracts for wind. We should be getting rid of those kickbacks and instead giving rebates, as I propose, to residents here so that they can actually purchase electric vehicles, so that they can meet my goal of 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030. Those are some of the things that we need to change. And having been responsible for bringing case after case, fighting utilities over the last 7 years at the Department of Public Utilities, I know full well what has gone on there, and also the next governor will have an opportunity to make some changes at the Department of Public Utility. And so, these are some areas where we've fallen short. Again, they're accomplishable, things that we can do, but it does take the tenacity and the will and the willingness to call out what's actually happening, and that's what I've been about.
And on the invitation, is that a yes, a no, or I'll think about it?
I don't think the fossil fuel industry likes me too much. ExxonMobil took me to court no less than 3 times in 3 different states to try to shut down my investigation. I am not on their holiday card list.
Okay, so we're going to do a quick lightning round.
I also, by the way, remember, I stopped 2 gas pipelines from coming into this state. Remember years ago, Kinder Morgan, Northeast Access. I also went to the Supreme Judicial Court to make sure that obsolete, soon-to-be obsolete pipeline infrastructure wasn't going to be built here on the backs of our ratepayers. So I think I've I've shown my willingness to stand up to the fossil fuel industry and also to oppose new gas infrastructure in this state. We absolutely need to do that as we move. As we got to rev up renewables, as we shut down our reliance on fossil fuels.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little bit of a lightning round here. It helps us shift gears, and frankly, it's kind of fun. So we're gonna do a little bit of it. If you were electric bike or electric scooter, which would you be?
Ooh, I'm gonna go bike. Do a lot of biking with the family. I haven't become brave enough to put the kids on the back of my bike like my husband does, but we do a lot of bike commuting in our family.
So you're an electric bike. How about you?
I don't know. I like the little the scooter.
Yeah.
I kind of akin to surfing, which is something I always wanted to learn to do, having grown up on the beach and never mastered.
And is there a big old tree out there somewhere that you love?
Oh, many. I mean, sugar maples all over my folks' property in New Hampshire, which is why I have a forest plan and conservation plan in my climate plan. I grew up on 40 acres of woods.
And how about a favorite green space for you?
Oh, well, you have me in my mind going to favorite tree.
No, let's do it. I love trees. Go tree.
It's making me get a little full clumps, actually. My now husband, who is listening somewhere at home, hi, honey, on one of our first dates, he took me to see his favorite tree in the Arnold Arboretum. So that's gonna go down as my favorite tree.
Please tell me that tree is still there and healthy. And
Yep.
okay, good. We're all going to check on the tree later. All right, so let's take in an audience question here. This one comes from an Elena in Cambridge. Senator Chang Diaz, I'll let you pick it up. Why are energy companies in charge of designing our energy future and not policymakers? How can we expect that companies protect our health and environment when they continue to invest in gas?
That's a great question, Elena. They shouldn't be, is the answer. And look, I'm going to go back again to my no fossil fuel donations pledge. In a Chang Diaz administration, you can have confidence that my anchor is going to be with the working families all across the state. Who are, and their children who are, I said climate change is not just for, my children and grandchildren, but I cannot tell you, everywhere that I go over the past 9 months on this campaign trail, including my own house, where my 8-year-old talks to me about climate change more than any other issue. But in backyard, gatherings and things all across the state on this campaign trail, I am constantly met by high schoolers and college students who are begging us to not hand them a planet on fire. And that is why I am so bullish about making this pledge so that they, above all, can know that they are going to be my North Star in policymaking. Fossil fuel companies nor utilities, should they be, in charge of writing the plans for our future. And, Maura, I have to, I respect, the work that you have done against ExxonMobil. I believe that you are not on their Christmas card list, but there are a lot of oil and gas utilities here in Massachusetts whose donation list you are on. There is $50,000 worth of fossil fuel donations on your campaign donation rolls since your last election, and I think it's important that we both make this pledge so that voters know where we stand.
Well, to be honest, I have to look at donations. I don't know exactly what you're referring to or who you're referring to. I am really pleased that my plan was endorsed by Bill McKibben, for whom I have a lot of respect and have worked with over the years. And I have a lot of support from a lot of folks in this space who know we can do more. So we can talk more in our campaigns kind of about who's given what where. But I think, what is important is I think we are both really committed to this. And that is a difference between the two gentlemen who were invited who did not show up. And so I think it's good that we're having this conversation, and we both, I think, demonstrate the aggressiveness and the urgency, and it's good that we're having this engagement tonight. I think about the fact that right now, as we speak, in the Netherlands, for example, we were talking about the utilities and their control over things. So here, it's the utilities who are buying the wind, when it could be our businesses. Look at Google's buying wind. It could be our municipalities. It could be our universities, our healthcare systems. I mean, 25% of the wind that's purchased in the Netherlands is purchased through just business. And I think that's a model as well of where we need to go and how we have to realign, the power here. Again, I go back to kickbacks because I called that out. There's no way that remuneration for some in the room, but the kickbacks to utility companies simply for signing these contracts, those days are over. We need to turn the page on that. And again, if we're going to give incentives to anybody, it should be to people to purchase electric vehicles. It should be to support electrification of all things transportation, which is something that I strongly advocate for in my plan, particularly starting with public transportation, but also growing EV infrastructure, charging stations, particularly in communities that have been disproportionately overburdened for far too long. Because this is also a conversation we've got to have. If you want to, part of the challenge is how to do all of this in a fair and equitable way, knowing that there are folks who have been long overburdened. We also have to be sensitive to their needs and how do we support them through this imperative transition.
So let's pick up on that. Both of you in your platforms talk about equity. You both talk about environmental justice. As I read through them, I picked up themes that were just different a little in the emphasis, ways that you would go at that. And a couple of things stood out to me. So I thought I'd ask each of you about one of the things that stood out. Senator Chang Diaz, one of the things that stood out to me was your emphasis on school buildings. There's a lot about retrofitting school buildings, the importance of school buildings, air quality inside school buildings. It felt to me that you were situating schools. So first, let me ask you, were you situating schools? Because this is not my main policy area, right? So I thought that was kind of helpful to be a little bit of an outsider looking there. And why? If you're going to situate a set of buildings, why are you situating schools the way that you are?
Yeah. I'm so interested that you picked that, that was how you received the plan as you were reading it. I will say, Tiziana, look, we do talk about schools and transitioning schools and making schools green in my Green New Deal plan. But I would say not particularly as an aspect of environmental justice and equity. We have about 1 million children all across Massachusetts of, all colors and economic backgrounds, all of whom are in school buildings, right? And so this is something we need to do for everyone. Both for the health and well-being of our children, but also to meet our goals with respect to transitioning our built environment. And school buildings are something where public sector has direct hands on those levers. With respect to climate justice and environmental justice, this is an issue on which I have been long in the trenches. I'm proud to have filed every year since I first came into office 13 years ago legislation to get a framework for environmental justice into our state laws, and I'm so thrilled that we finally now do, thanks to the Climate Roadmap bill last year. And again, getting equity right there into the mission of the DPU is a really important change. But we're not stopping there, right? In my Green New Deal plan, we also make very explicit that it is going to be low-income communities, communities of color, immigrant communities that get the impacts first and worst of climate change. We have the 3rd highest concentration here in Massachusetts of affordable housing units in coastal floodplains, right? When we see heat waves, it is low-income communities and communities of color that bear the most dire health consequences from that, just as we have seen with COVID over the past 2 years. So this, and this is deep personal stuff for me. I think, anyone who's been watching Beacon Hill for the last 13 years knows there's been no more fierce nor effective champion on issues of equity in our state house, and that will carry through in my climate agenda. And let me say lastly, it's not just about protecting communities of color and low-income communities from the brunt of the negative effects of climate change, but with the enormous economic opportunities that are going to come with this transition to a green economy, tens of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars. We have to make sure that those communities that have been in the front of the line for the negative impacts are in the front of the line for the jobs, and not just the jobs, but the wealth creation, right? And this is why in the Green New Deal plan, we've also said that we will be embedding into the procurement processes of the state for all of our environment, for clean energy procurement, for siting decisions, for land use decisions, components that prioritize taking a bite out of our massive racial wealth divide in Massachusetts with this new economic development that we're going to be doing.
So it's interesting that you took us there, because that was also something I was going to ask you about from your plan. And I want to make it clear, when I'm emphasizing something from one of your plans, it doesn't mean it's not in the other one, right? We don't have 72 hours. So I'm picking specific things to ask each of you about. And Attorney General Healey, you talk about offshore. You talk about our port. You talk about the Clean Energy Center. So talk a little bit about the jobs piece, the green jobs piece, and equity and environmental justice.
I mean, this is what is really exciting to me, because if you think about economic mobility, economic prosperity, particularly for Black and brown residents who have been left behind, due to 400 years of systemic racism that shows its vestiges in all forms, here's the thing. We have a bunch of jobs coming our way that are absolutely going to be essential to getting us to where we need to be. And we have an opportunity, if we align our workforce development with those jobs, to create those opportunities. So I think about what can happen in high schools, vocational schools, technical schools, community colleges right now if we match up what the jobs are that we know are going to be absolutely necessary to fill. It's a huge opportunity for empowerment. It's a huge opportunity for wealth creation. It's a huge opportunity for jobs. And, look, I left private practice 15 years ago to become head of the Civil Rights Division for a reason. I took a 70% pay cut because I believe deeply in civil rights to my core. And I've put an equity lens on everything I've done as Attorney General, and I am committed to doing that as your governor. It's why years ago, my office, we were bringing cases against bus companies that were idling in school because of the effects on kids in the air. I have a whole initiative out of my office where we've gone after school for asbestos, bad asbestos removal in schools, a whole initiative out of my office on that. It's why we recently, last year for Earth Day, a year ago, I was standing in Springfield because we used money recovered in one of our environmental cases to fund the purchase of 80 air filters around the city of Springfield, once the asthma capital of the world, sadly, to better measure that air quality. So it's just to say, Tiziana, that equity is something that we need to account for across the board. The preservation, the creation of green spaces. I think through COVID, didn't we learn who had access to a playground, who had access to a park, who had access to clean air and green space, and who did not? And that's what the challenge is, and that's what the opportunity is as we go forward with intentionality through budget, in particular, to address some of these absolutely needed concerns that have only been exacerbated.
So let's go back. Let's go back to Springfield for a second. So it ranked 12th in the country in 2021 for asthma prevalence, emergency visits, deaths due to asthma. That's according to the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America. Now, according to the Commonwealth, in 2020, 95% of its population lived in what would be called an environmental justice block group. So you talked about, we know the given link between asthma, air pollution, environmental justice communities, a specific thing that you could do as governor for Springfield to improve that link and the public health that's related to climate for a community like Springfield.
Well, I think it is about doing any number of things. I mean, you have to make sure that you're not continuing to cite dirty facilities and factories and industrial entities in these overburdened communities. That Springfield program is interesting that I initiated, because it is now currently real-time measuring the air quality, giving us guidance, working directly with the Yale School of Public Health on where we can target and go after polluters, because we got to be macro and we got to be micro. And I believe that we can do both at the same time. And that's why, having had the experience of going after polluters time and time again across the state, I know the importance of doing that and making sure that we are attentive, going forward with respect to citing, with respect to funding, with respect, and I'll say this, you know what the next thing the governor can do? Is make sure that there are voices at the table. Because if there had been voices from the community at the table, if those who are living and have lived and suffered in overburdened communities for far too long had been at the table as laws and policies were adopted and made, and again, credit to the legislature for the votes taken and the work done in this space, but a lot of things happen through agencies and elsewhere where those voices weren't represented. And that's why a big part of my EJ piece is about making sure those voices are formally, structurally represented where they need to be.
So staying with that, jump in.
I just want to jump in. I think this is a really helpful way to think about the problem, to zero in on Springfield as an example. And there are so many ways that we can do and that we must do the work of environmental justice and equity. And sometimes it comes in these sort of, easily recognizable packages of, we're going to have a program for this or an advisory board for that, right? But the more important levers for getting it right are in the, core central tenets of our plans. And I'll give a specific example that relates to Springfield. In my Green New Deal plan, we call for large-scale investments in electrifying but also expanding public transportation, mass transit in this state, including east-west rail and including fare-free transit in our RTAs and our MBTA, right? That's something that is a direct impact on the people of Springfield, both of those things, the RTA, fare-free transit, and east-west rail. And it's right there in the core. We don't call it out as, look, this is an environmental justice provision, right? But there's and this is an honest difference, right, between the Attorney General's plan and mine, where we both talk about in our transportation sector needing to make investments in electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. Maura makes a big bet on electric vehicles, but there is not a similarly big bet in her plan on transit, right, that is going to directly impact people who are transit dependent in this state. And that is, that's a difference when it comes to environmental justice. And with respect to bringing voices to the table, here's where I am going to tie in education with environmental justice, Tiziana, rather than in the school buildings. Is in the education that's going on inside those school buildings. And I will say, I have heard the Attorney General mention many times over the course of the campaign so far, centering racial justice and equity in all things. And those are extremely powerful words, Maura. They're powerful in part because, they give people who watched the video of George Floyd with horror feelings of comfort that their next governor is going to make sure things like that never happen again, or the kind of disparities that we saw with COVID-19 over the past 2 years, that things like that are never going to happen again. But in order to make sure that those things are true, that those things don't happen again, or that we don't see these kind of disparities in Springfield, you have to back up the words with actions. And the truth is, there are many moments that people of color needed you to be there to center racial equity when you did not. In your plan, right, there's those promises for electric vehicles, but no commensurate promise for people who are transit dependent. There were legislators who frankly hid behind you to excuse their vote against the police reform bill in this state. And you did not say anything when they hid behind your letter that you wrote to the conference committee on that police reform bill. And when there was $1 billion on the line for education equity, and there's no bigger beneficiary of this bill, the Student Opportunity Act, that got that $1.5 billion, Springfield Public Schools are already seeing a $60 million increase in their school budget because we got that legislation passed. That is over $2,000 per pupil. That is what's going to help people get to the table when it comes to the siting of polluting facilities or burning biomass or any of the like decisions in Springfield. When the chips were down and the debate was on and there was $1 billion of difference between proposals that were being debated in the legislature on education equity, Maura, you were not willing to stand up for the proposal that was going to get that difference for Springfield Public School kids. When it comes to environmental justice,
you got to wrap this up soon so I can give her a chance to respond.
I respect the hell out of your work on the national level. I will say it again. But standing up for, racial equity at every turn means more than doing it when it's against Donald Trump or against ExxonMobil. The next governor is going to need to have the courage to do that when it's against members of our own party in the legislature, or when it's, in opposition to wealthy donors who just want you to focus on something else that they think is a higher priority. When it comes to environmental justice, we need follow-through, courage to, to put actions behind those words.
Okay, so pretty direct, wide aperture in the issues there. I'm going to give you a chance to just talk.
Okay. I obviously disagree with what are mischaracterizations of my record on the education front, on any number of fronts, but to focus on climate. Here's what I'm doing as somebody who believes in equity and environmental justice. As we speak, my team, who negotiated and went after Columbia Gas for the damage that they caused up in the Merrimack Valley, they're working out the distribution of funds that are going directly into low-income homes to help with weatherization, to help with supporting those households who, again, are situated in overburdened areas. I mean, I agree with the absolutely holistic approach that one needs to bring to all of this. With respect to transportation, it's interesting, and maybe you haven't read my plan, but it includes a whole section on clean transportation as part of my climate plan. It calls for the electrification of public transportation, regional transit authorities, the T, commuter rails. It calls for, of course, 1 million electric vehicles by 2030 and growth in terms of electric vehicle infrastructure. But it absolutely has a significant focus on the need to address emissions from transportation, which, as noted, are over 40% of the emissions that we've got to confront and deal with in our state. It's also why I have long supported West-East Rail. I think I was asked that the first day of the campaign, and I think it was one of the first things I said was that I support East-West Rail. I supported South Coast Rail. I support investments in transportation infrastructure because it is absolutely essential to dealing with the climate crisis and where we need to go. So, those are some of the things I think about. Again, I have. Remember, it was my office a couple of years ago. Remember they wanted to take down those trees on Melnia Cass, right? And I said no. And I called the city and I said no. And it's part of it is just recognizing the heat deserts that exist, the problems in our overburdened communities, and you don't need to double down and make things worse. I agree with that. Stop digging, And these are really core principles to me. And maybe another time we can talk about some of the other topics that you raised. But I've absolutely always fully supported the Student Opportunity Act and funding for education. And during the last few years, but over the last several years, it hasn't been just about suing Donald Trump. You know what it's been about the last couple of years? Making sure that families who were facing eviction were helped by my office, and kept in their homes, making sure that our RAFT program that funds rental assistance, was operating and pushing them to make sure that those things were happening, making sure that moratoriums on foreclosures and debt collection, were held in line. Again, because this goes to those most marginalized, those most vulnerable, and that has been my life's work in the Attorney General's office, and it will remain my commitment.
Okay.
As governor.
So I'm going to bring us, I was going to say down, but that makes it sound like down. I'm going to bring us narrow. How's that for a word? Into a couple of narrower questions to really look at how you take on a policy issue. So Massachusetts Climate Action Network just released a report noting that municipal utilities or municipal light plants have a collective energy mix that's made up of about 2.5% clean energy, 38% non-emitting energy. And for people who haven't read the report, the difference there is the presence of nuclear energy between the 2.5% and the 38% non-emitting energy. Were you surprised by those numbers? And what do you do to bring that number up in municipal energies?
I was a little bit surprised by the numbers, not wildly, but I would say a little bit. I would say, with respect to nuclear in particular, I would say...
Wait, I'm sorry, nuclear because it was more than you thought or less than you thought?
More, okay. Yeah. So, this is a place where I think there's so much value to be derived, that we could optimize and do more of. There are so many municipal governments around, we have 351 cities and towns across Massachusetts. Not all of them are like Boston. And many of them have very small municipal staff, maybe just one or two, paid staff members at the municipal level who are juggling a lot of functions. And so this is a place where the state can really provide value as a partner with municipalities in, providing some muscle when it comes to planning and technical assistance to help transition those municipal utilities, municipal light plants to non-emitting sources to be in line, right, and to be a part of the team when it comes to meeting those goals of 100% renewable green energy as a state for meeting our electricity needs by 2030. And there are just so many folks across the state, Tiziana. Again, I say, as I've crisscrossed the state over the 9 months, people who feel a deep, deep sense of urgency that we do need to go faster, harder, and more urgently at this problem. All of those people live in municipalities, right? So those stakeholders are the same as who's talking to, Maura and me about needing to go more urgently at the state level. Folks, and there are a lot of municipalities, we have to call this out, that are leading the charge. They are the vanguard in our state, right? That want to go faster than even the state is going with respect to our built environment, right? Communities that have been begging the state to be able to, do stretch zoning codes to require electric-only new construction. We've got to unleash that power to let the municipalities that want to lead the way, and blaze that path for the rest of the municipalities, and then for the state to be, a collector of that technical assistance and a convener and a support to municipalities that then are going to follow the great results that those vanguard communities are giving us.
So those stretch zoning codes, I'm guessing, rang a bell for you. It was one of the questions that I had ready for you, and then we had audience questions about this as well. So twice with the town of Brookline trying to pass bylaws that would have either limited or eliminated fossil fuel capacity in new construction. Your position there was that it superseded state authority. In your platform, you advocate for that, for creating building codes that would allow municipalities to do things like that. That is interesting, right? It's interesting to have a candidate for governor who's interested in ceding state power to municipalities. So talk about that a little bit. We had several audience questions on it, and it's an interesting yin and yang there. So why favor it, and how do you get it done?
Well, why favor it? Because we need to be doing everything that we can with respect to the climate crisis. And if our cities and towns are in positions to try and do new things, then they should have that opportunity. It was, it has been my position that they be afforded those opportunities. And you're right, that's what my plan actually puts forward. Use of the stretch code and allowing municipalities to do things, including banning fossil fuels. So that to me, there doesn't seem to be a dissonance there. I think the responsibility of any governor is to make sure that you are doing everything that you can and utilizing all powers, utilizing all levers, exploring all opportunities to make sure that gets done. And you referred to the decision. I mean, as Attorney General, I have to be able to, I'm obligated to do certain things, including defend state law. And so then when those bylaws were presented, the decision of my office was the decision of my office consistent with the law. At the same time, though, we have been advocating with DOER and others about their current, what we view as their existing authority. And I have put forward in my plan to give authority to cities and towns to utilize what they can in terms of their built plans to address climate.
All right, so let's do a one-sentence answer on this next one.
Can I just add a super quick? That while I do think that municipalities that want to go faster, over these next few years, that we should, unleash that and follow it. I do say, in a Chang Diaz administration, in our plan, we do have that backstop that all of our new construction, our new buildings in Massachusetts will be carbon zero by 2030, right? Because it's important that we have that bottom line that's going to get us where we need to go, so that it's not just sort of as fast as municipalities may end up wanting to go.
Okay. So
and I, to be clear, I completely agree with that. I mean, this not, you just leave it to the cities and towns to do. There's got to be a state, effort that's huge and targeted. That said, I also agree that we need to allow and empower our cities and towns to do these things.
Okay, we're going to use Linda and Plymouth's question for kind of a one-sentence answer. We've done a lot of in-depth stuff here. So Linda says, would you consider using a carbon pollution fee to provide long-term funding for climate action? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes or no?
I think all options should be on the table. That said, I think I'm the only one who's proposed using at least 1% of the budget to have that directed to agencies. When you talk about the help for municipalities and the like, we need to be funding more of those efforts through our budgeting. Also, we've got $14 million in ARPA funds coming in, and I strongly advocate for the application of those funds in this space in particular. And so we've got to make opportunity of what is coming in terms of our revenue.
So let's talk money. Always fun to talk money. And one of the things that's interesting is the $8 billion in federal funds coming into Massachusetts on infrastructure, right? Greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, currently about 40% of the overall emissions in the state. It's the largest source of emissions by sector. We've got an $8 billion influx. I had a funny moment, I think it was with former Governor Deval Patrick, when he was like, oh my God, I would have loved to have been governor when $8 billion came in that I could spend. You kind of hear him drooling over the line while we were talking. So you get this money, right? Take the climate lens. Where's the most important place for it to go? State Senator Jing Diaz.
So first of all, I think it's really important to put these numbers in context, because I think people hear any number and the word billion behind it, and it's just like, well, it's like the Grand Canyon, and it's hard to contemplate what
big and
really
little at the same time. I get it.
But and I don't. Doesn't surprise me to hear Governor Patrick say that, because I remember when I came into office 13 years ago, it was right as the Great Recession was hitting, and we didn't know where the bottom was, and poor Governor Patrick, he had to govern through all those really scarce years. But to put this in context for folks. $8 billion of federal infrastructure coming in. The size of our state of good repair backlog for our roads, bridges, and transit infrastructure alone, just the state of good repair backlog, is about $10 billion, right?
Meaning keeping it where it ought to be.
Right. Just making it so stuff isn't crumbling. So we have got a lot of work to do here, and we have to be frank. When talking with one another and with the voters and the taxpayers about how we are going to make this transition to a clean and green state and an economy. It is going to take money. We cannot hide the ball on that. The Green New Deal plan that I've laid out, where I think I can see where you're going, right? How are we going to pay for these things? So I'm just going to answer that question, right? Which is to say, it's going to be a combination of things. One, the Fair Share Amendment, which I have been out and proud and stumping for every day on this campaign trail, and since before I was a candidate for governor. You can clap for the Fair Share Amendment, yes. So part of it from the Fair Share Amendment, part of it from federal infrastructure dollars and ARPA dollars. We need to make sure that those dollars are being spent in a way that we get at least a double bottom line, if not a triple, in terms of transitioning our to a green energy economy and closing the racial wealth divide. But I do believe we are also going to need, in one form or another, to put a tax on carbon in this state if we are going to fund the things that we say we believe in as a state, and use some of the proceeds from that to finance this transition, because it is going to take upfront investment to invest in our mass transit systems, to do those port infrastructure improvements, to build the pipeline of human beings, right? The talent that we need to have ready to plan, design, build, and maintain all of this beautiful new green infrastructure. So I'm so glad that, I already forget her name, but that one of the listeners asked that question.
It was Lauren, I think.
Lauren, thank you for that great question.
Linda, thank you.
Asked that question because it's important that we be forthright about how we're going to do these ambitious plans.
Yeah. So pick up the money ball and take it the next place in terms of how we pay for what we need to get done.
Well, I agree with what Senator Jing Diaz is saying. I mean, we've got to look at it in the context of what this is really going to take. I think that, as I said earlier, making use of the ARPA funds, I think making use of, I also support the Fair Share Amendment. These things are absolutely essential. And part of this is like, what's the cost of not doing this? I mean, we are at a point, what is the cost of not doing this? And I think in Massachusetts, it's about making sure that people understand not only the urgency, but also the opportunity. If we're able to do this with wind, we'll be generating 130% of our electricity, saving over close to $2.5 billion a year in Massachusetts alone. So it's the moral imperative, it's the economic opportunity, and as with any investment, as with any advent through generations of something new, it's about acclimation, it's about getting people on board, and I think both of us are out there and willing to sell it to the people of the Commonwealth about what needs to happen. Now, I favor programs like RGGI. I favor programs like TCI. You asked about a carbon tax. I'm not committing to that right now. I am committing to revisiting and going back to explore RGGI and TCI and programs like that, because we also cannot wait for the federal government. I know that. You all know that. We have to work here in Massachusetts. We also have to work regionally. And that is something that I've had experience doing as Attorney General, reaching out and working with other states. And we're gonna need that kind of regional, collaboration. I know things fell apart, okay? But we're in a different place than we were a year or 2 or 3 ago. And we have an opportunity to revisit that. And I promise as governor, I will bring the urgency to that and the commitment to trying to drive regional solutions to our climate needs.
Let's stay regional, actually, and because I wanted to talk about regional collaboration. I was going to bring up TCI, which is the Transportation Climate Initiative. Okay. When working on the mayor's race last year in the city of Boston, one of the things we talked about a lot was the area around Malneacas and Massachusetts Avenue, and how that was a problem that was intensified there but was a regional problem. And one of the challenges was collaborating with other cities and towns who had to take steps and make moves, and the challenges of that. That was is a critical issue on that scale. Now you step back, right? And you look at climate and energy, where we have a state to manage, a legislature to work with, and problems that cross boundaries. And in this case, they don't just cross city and town boundary or state boundaries, we're talking global boundaries, right? So I want to know, my last big question for each of you, and I'll start with you, A.G. Healey, I'll go to you, Senator Chang Diaz. What's the mojo you've got to get that regional collaboration really done?
I have to say that the challenges we face as a society are so daunting. When you open the paper every day, when you turn on the news at night, it can be overwhelming, Tiziana, I know that. But I would not be in this, and I would not be pursuing this if I did not have optimism, if I did not believe in the capacity of people of the state to come together and harness all our resources and drive us forward. And Massachusetts, we've had our issues, okay? But we're the state that led on universal access to health care. We're the state that led on marriage equality. And, earlier today, both of us had the privilege, we were down at Boston Common, where the MLK monument is going to be. Today,
Boston
yeah, it was great. And then today is Coretta Scott King's birthday, actually. And the two, of course, met here in Boston. It's just to say that nobody's going to tell me that we can't get this done, that we don't have capacity. This has been my drive. This has been my approach, is to sort of not accept things the way they are, but to get after it, to be willing to be aggressive, to be innovative, to do things differently, and just be absolutely tenacious. So I believe in this, and I believe if more people understood. It's sometimes just a matter of bringing people on board a little bit. If more people understood what was happening around us right now, the opportunities we have to actually drive down emissions, to actually meet and exceed current climate goals, the opportunity that we have to create good, excellent paying jobs, the opportunity that we have at wealth creation, the opportunity that we have to address racial disparities in housing and transportation once and for all. More people will be on board. And I will absolutely work. Pick up the phone and call Governor Mills, call anyone to talk about what we need to do. It was disappointing, wasn't it, to see some of that fall apart? It was really disappointing. But it doesn't mean the game is over. No, it just means you pick up the ball and you go forward. And I believe that we can do it here in Massachusetts. And we have had the opportunity to lead in Massachusetts. This country needs Massachusetts leadership. And as I say, the innovation, the technology that is going to power our globe out of this is right here, and that is such a gem.
Okay, thank you. Mojo question over to you.
Mojo question. All right, you got away with the framing. See that? I love it. Look, there is only one candidate in this race who has built and shepherded broad coalitions to drive transformational change to a win on Beacon Hill. And I've done it many times over my 13 years. And in each of them, right, the Student Opportunity Act is going to deliver $1.5 billion, not in total, but a year once it's fully phased in, heavily targeted to our lowest income schools and students in this state. When we started that fight back in 2015, people said that will never happen. That's impossible. That's pie in the sky. People said the same thing when we were pushing for comprehensive criminal justice reform in 2015, in 2016, in 2017. We got it done in 2018. People said the same thing about truly robust police accountability legislation that had massive opposition from highly financed police interest groups across the state, as well as inside the State House in both Republican and Democratic membership in the State House. But we got it done. So, you know, I think past is prologue, right? The best mojo that I can point you to is what has gotten those things done in the past. And we are going to need a governor who has that skill set, who has that record of success, and is both willing to work with anybody in any party who wants to rock on these goals, and who is willing to stand up to anybody who's going to stand in the way of driving that kind of transformational change. And again, I'm the only candidate in this race who has done that. But I want to also say, Tiziana, and I will, apply that skill set to, organizing those kinds of coalitions regionally in our country and nationally. But it is also important that we do remember that we should not tie our fates and wait on the success of, or the willingness of, certainly the federal government, but also regional partners. Because ultimately, we do have the tools that we need. We have the natural resources, the technology, the know-how. We have the tools that we need to get the job done in Massachusetts. And it is a very precarious position to put our state in, to put us at, at the sort of mercy of the political whims of folks in other states, even though we are going to put the best mojo to it, right, in bringing them along. But as we've seen with the TCI, it can fall apart, and sometimes it's out of our control. As we've seen with the Canadian Hydro plan, right, we should not be putting Massachusetts at the end of a very long extension cord, that runs through other states and, even it depends on other countries in order to meet our climate change goals. We have to have a plan that is also self-sufficient and that creates opportunities for economic development opportunity right here in Massachusetts. And so my plan does not depend on other states or other countries. We will go there, we will work hard, but it doesn't depend on it because we can do it right here in Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you. So let's finish with just a little bit of fun. We'll do one more lightning round, a couple of questions. The green job you think would be coolest to have?
I would probably say the people. Well, it's, how can you choose? Like, I want to be in the woods. I want to be in the woods. Making sure that old growth remains in place. I'd love to be out on the infrastructure in the water and being part of lines being built. I'm not an engineer, so I guess that'd be very aspirational. But there's there's so many jobs. There's so many jobs, and it's so exciting. And part of it.
I want to keep this one tight. Sorry, because we're wrapping up. I got to turn this back over to Margaret in just a second.
Yeah.
Coolest green job for me, I think I want to build one of those turbine thingies out in the water. How about for you?
Governor.
Okay. But I can't let you drop the mic on that moment, so we'll do one more. Gardening or fishing?
Oh, gardening.
And is it vegetables or flowers?
Vegetables.
Gardening or fishing?
Fishing.
And is it catch and release or cook it and eat it?
Catch and release.
All right. From here, I appreciate both of you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to our CEO, Margaret Lowe here.
God, that was, I could go on and on with lightning round. We could have gone on for at least an hour more. That was a power-packed hour. I have to say to all three of you, there was a lot of mojo on this stage. So I think that's going to be a theme throughout the rest of this campaign. Thank you, A.G. Healey. Thank you, Senator Chang Diaz. Thank you, Tiziana Dearing, for leading such a lively, smart, thoughtful, respectful conversation. I want to thank the Environmental League of Massachusetts again, our great collaborator for tonight's event. I also want to thank our friends at PBS Rhode Island for carrying us to the people, to other parts of this great state. I also want to thank all of you here in CitySpace with us and those joining virtually from home, from taking time out of your busy lives to be here with us. We actually know that the most precious thing you have to give is your time. So we're enormously grateful that you spent so much of it with us. I would like to actually have you give yourselves a round of applause for being a marvelous audience. I'm not going to let you go yet because I'm going to take advantage of this environmentally conscious, politically engaged crowd and tell you about Cooked. It's the search for sustainable eats. It's WBUR's brand new newsletter to help people understand our impact on climate change and actionable steps we can all take to make a difference. For those of you here in CitySpace, when you walk out, there are going to be little yellow cards that you can grab and you'll know how to sign up for Cooked. For those of you at home, the details are right there. Please sign up. I can't wait for Cooked, which launches in just 2 weeks. Back to the race for governor. We have a little more than 4 months to go, if I have it right, before the Democratic primary. There'll be lots more action to come right here on the campaign trail and right here in CitySpace. So we will be here, we hope, with all of you as the campaign heats up. We look forward to seeing all of you on the radio and back here again soon. Have a lovely evening. Maura Healey, Sonia Chang, Tiziana Dearing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nice to
so
see
much.
you.
It's
Yeah.
great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.